Alright, I think enough time has passed that I can respond to the comments, and let's get into a little bit of Pokeclicker save editing. Full disclaimer for this video, I'm making it just for people who don't have the time to grind on Pokeclicker and find it maybe a little bit exhaustive to just do the same thing over and over again and just want to get the experience of playing through the entire game. If you are just looking to play through the entire game, I'm going to link a video in the description where you can get a pre-made save file with a 1 trillion damage Magikarp, which should allow you to solo through everything in the game. But for people who are looking to edit specifically their own Pokeclicker save file, whether that's to add items or to make their mon stronger, or maybe to add a way to speed up certain processes, this video is for you. Let's go ahead and hop in to my most recent Pokeclicker save file here. We're going to see that I have all this specific amount of currencies, and I have this Oak Items layout, and I have all these Master Balls, and my Pokemon attack is maybe a little bit inflated by buffing up the numbers a bit, mostly just for the Mega Pokemon so that those would be easier to access. And one little thing that I can do in the hatchery is actually if we grab one of those Mega Pokemon, you'll notice that it only takes 31 steps for me to hatch it, which is not normal in the slightest, and in 3 rounds we're done, and you hatch it again and it will be way stronger on the next go through. This video is going to be detailing some sections about how I do that stuff, and how you do that stuff is through save editing. So what you do is go to your start menu and go where you normally save, and you can download your save into a text file. And if we look here, you can look on for infinity, but you can also see what that text file actually looks like, and it is just a big old random jumble of numbers and letters, capitalized, sometimes uncapitalized, really nothing that you can pull from this. However, if we Control A in order to copy the entire thing if you're working on a computer, and then we Control C in order to copy it, then we can go over to a base 64 decoder or encoder. In order to get a text that we can actually manipulate, we need to decode it, and then whenever we're done, we need to encode it back into the base 64 format. So I already have the Pokeclicker save file put into the decode, and then down here you might see some words that actually look familiar. So we can just directly copy here, and that is something that I have already done. And then we can take that code and put it into a Word document in order to better increase the readability. Of course, you could just put this back into Notepad, but Word makes it a little bit easier, in my opinion at least, to look at these kind of things. And I've gone through and I've highlighted some important spots that we can look at in order to change specific things. So for starters here, after item list is all of your items. If you change these numbers in order to be larger, you will have more of them. This includes things like Ghost Memories for Savali and Dubious Disc for Evolving Porygon. Then you also have some held items like your Silk Scarf and your Macho Brace are kind of nice to have. So this first section early on is a nice way to get some of the items that only drop like 1 out of 15 times that you do a dungeon and are kind of cumbersome to get. If you just want 1 or so, or maybe give yourself a million, I guess I can't control what you do, then this would be the spot to do it pretty early on here. If you go down a bit to where oak items appear after this big false true table that I probably wouldn't mess with because I think that would really mess something up, but after oak items you can find all their different levels. So if you don't want to waste the time trying to build up your oak items, then you could just set them to be level 5 with the max experience and all that jazz. And right after the oak items, we have the caught Pokemon, and this is going to be very important for changing the data of all the attack on your Pokemon and that jazz. And I'm not exactly sure how it works. However, I know how to increase numbers and watch increased numbers on the save, so that does work. And here in green, I have highlighted Pokemon number 9 with the ID, as you can see here, which is Blastoise, which I wanted to get high so that I could Mega Evolve it. And with Blastoise, it would seem that I increased the numbers after 0 and 1, especially the number that comes with this one parentheses. I increased that a lot, and I think that increased the attack of the Pokemon. If you did the decode with the Magikarp save file, I would also be willing to bet that that is what I did, as I just increased this value that comes after 1. However, if you don't want to just increase the value of your Pokemon, because you might have to come back and decode and encode the save file, is kind of boring, what you can do is you can actually change the vitamins directly, which is the number that comes after 2 over here. And what I've found is that if you add 40,000 is a lot here. This is the number of the item that gives you the attack. I believe it's the Proteans. If you give yourself 40,000 Proteans, that means that you gain 40,000 attack every time that you hatch the egg, roughly. But it also means that because you have a bunch of Proteans, it will also take longer to hatch the egg. However, a way that I have found to offset this is to give yourself 90 of these number 2, which is, I believe, what makes the egg hatch faster in the game, in that item. Yeah, see, if we come back over to the save file here, we can see where Blastoise has 40,090 vitamins used, and that is because I have 40,000 Proteans on it and then 90 Carbos in order to offset the large amount of time that those Proteans would cause, as it really slows down the breeding efficiency. But with the Carbos, you only have to walk 31 steps in order to hatch your Pokemon. So if you wanted to, you can make a save file where you just give all of your Pokemon 90 Carbos, and then that makes them hatch basically instantaneously. I did try to Control H and then replace the Carbos one time. However, whenever I tried to re-encode the save file, it didn't work whenever I did it, so there might be something else later on in the code that keeps you from just taking that 2 with the parentheses and then the colon after it, and then it would be a 0 if you haven't given any of your Pokemon any Carbos, and then replacing that with 90. But this is how you would get around the limiting power of the fact that you can only have like 50 or so vitamins. You could just go into the code and change it, and the game shouldn't give you any problems. There's a very, very long list in here of Pokemon. It's because there's so many Pokemon in this game, but the way that you can find them is by using their National Dex ID, and then if there's an alternate form, for example, Blastoise has Clone Blastoise, it's usually a, as we can see here, the ID of the National Dex Pokemon, and then there is a decimal after that Pokemon. So using this method, it's much, much faster to speed up your Pokeclicker save file, especially if there's like one trainer that you just have to spend like days on end grinding for. You can speed up the process of increasing the attack of your mons. Here's Pink. What is Pink? Okay, Pink is the gem wallet, which is the value of all the things to activate your flutes. You can just increase the value here. It's directly after that long list of Pokemon IDs. And then after the gem wallet and the gem upgrades, we run into the underground stuff, which I have never dared to really change because it scares me. But then after the underground stuff, right down here, we run into the farming category, which is where it holds all the values for the berries. So you can directly change the values of how many of each berry you have, and then whether or not you have actually unlocked that berry. Seems like I have all of them unlocked except for one here, which is marked as false. Not sure what that is, but might be something that got added in. But as long as you have the berry unlocked and then a specific amount of that berry, it's just like you went through the actual trouble of trying to mutate it yourself. And there are some quests that are locked behind mutating berries, and I was never really into mutating berries all that much. Not one of my favorite features, if I'm being honest. Then after the berries is all the farm stuff, and I wouldn't mess with the farm stuff because that scares me too. And then after the farm stuff here, you can see that there is quest-based stuff, and you could edit the quest stuff. There would probably be a hiccup in the game at some point if you like complete a quest that you don't have access to yet. I would not recommend trying that. And also you can just edit the number of quest points that you have, so again, not suggested. And then after your quest points, you have the statistics, which control things that get counted in the game over time, which does link to some of the achievement stuff. However, if you're going to be increasing the attack power of your Pokemon through the way that we discussed before, there's really no reason to be increasing these numbers unless you wanted to like fake brag to somebody that your numbers are high, which is just a trashy thing to do, so don't do it. Oh, but here specifically, I decided to highlight the gyms defeated, just because you unlock the ability to auto-battle gyms after a certain level. I'm not sure if that was changed at some point. If I reach around in my brain, I feel like it's 100 times you had to beat a gym before it unlocked the auto-battle, so you could just set all of these to 100 in order to save yourself a little bit of time. And then obviously the same goes for dungeons, but with dungeons, it's much higher until you really start to get the payoff of making the dungeon smaller. So with that, you could just increase the dungeon, and then, especially if you have quests that ask you to clear a dungeon like 30 times, if it takes you a minute to clear a dungeon, then that's going to take you half an hour. A saddening amount of time to spend just clearing dungeons. But if you make it so that you max out the dungeon, and then it only takes you like 10 seconds to go through a dungeon, then that only takes you roughly 5 minutes instead, which is much better. And then after this, we get back into some of the number counting things that don't really affect the gameplay, and all of the temporary battles in the game are also here. Really wouldn't bother messing with that either. Then we enter a long section for the dungeon guide clears, which, just like the farm and the underground, really wouldn't bother messing with, because it absolutely terrifies me. It doesn't just scare me. I mean, that feature's like in beta still, probably. It should double scare you just like it double scares me. And if we keep scrolling, we find like shadow female Pokemon captured. This is where it just counts whether or not you've captured things, which I'm not sure if this is related to EVs, maybe? But I really wouldn't bother messing with it if you're just going to increase the attack power of your Pokemon from the previous method. And then once we're getting very close to the bottom here, we run into a bunch of more quest stuff and determining what quest you have available and what quest you have completed. And then here we have the spot where you can turn on and off challenges. So if you exited out of a challenge that you wanted to continue for whatever reason, you could turn it on here again. And then we enter some of the Battle Frontier stuff, where you can get the rewards for beating certain levels. Like if you, for example, are on 460 here, then you get 40 Dawnstones, which, I mean, I guess you could edit this, but if you're just going to edit in the items anyways that you need, there's not really much point to doing it. And then at the very, very end, it's just the settings that you can readily change, so that way it remembers what settings you had whenever you were last on Pokeclicker, such as like your notifications on, or that you hear a sound whenever a new berry is discovered, all that kind of stuff that you can pretty easily change, and there's really no reason to be changing it here. And yeah, that's just about it for the Pokeclicker save file. Let me just restate the disclaimer that it's very important that you don't just flat out delete a Pokeclicker save file, rather that you have a backup copy if you're going to edit it, because if you edit it in a way that the game no longer accepts it, then you just kind of lose your save file. So by editing a Pokeclicker save file, you accept full responsibility for if you ruin your save. And obviously, don't ask me how to repair your save file if you've broken it, because I got no clue. I mean, I barely understand how this stuff works. But once you have your save file all edited and ready to go, I guess I didn't make any actual changes. Let me make like one change. Alright, I've decided to change it so that Pokemon 123 is now, or 123.01, sorry for messing that up. They are now going to be holding a Silk Scarf, and let's give them a very specific amount of proteins that I definitely couldn't have thought out before the start of the video, like 80 on the calciums, I guess. And now we're going to Control A and Control C in order to copy everything. If you are working on a computer again, we're going to head back over to our decode and encode website, and we want to switch modes. Now that we are on encode, we can just Control V in order to copy in our code, and let's press the encode button, and then that will register into a bunch of jumbled numbers and letters yet again, and we can just copy that to our clipboard. And then I would suggest making a new notepad just paste it in a new notepad, and then the name of the notepad shouldn't matter. You can just title it like edited save 1 or something like that. And if we go over to import save, we can create our new save. Looks like it worked. Click the one on the right, I believe, should be the new one. Okay, it was actually the first save that had the edited thing. But if we see here, Pokemon 123, which I didn't do that because I was Fire Farmer 123. That was just an extreme coincidence, I swear. But Pokemon 123.0 was Scyther, who gained the 40,000 Proteans and then the 80 Carbos, and now has an Egg Steps of 97 and a breeding efficiency of 16,500, which is pretty good. Oh, and I just looked up to see if Pincan Scyther had an item, but I think since I gave it a Silk Scarf, and that's an item that only normal types can use, I think that just didn't work. So if you are going to give a Pokemon an item, obviously give them one that vibes with them. But once again, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. Save your Pokeclicker save files in like 2 different spots, so that way you always have one that will be untouchable in case you mess something up. And if you do mess something up, that's your own fault. That is the inherent risk of doing Pokeclicker save editing, and don't ask other people to help you fix it, because that really bugs people when they have to fix something that's not intended by the game's actual own design. But thank you so much for watching. This will be the final Pokeclicker video, and of course I have a bunch of other videos over here that if you would watch would help me out a lot. We're gonna have some great videos coming down the line, and as a matter of fact, we've had some great videos, like Pokemon Sword without being able to see. I worked really hard on that video, and I think it's really great. And we also had 128 Teams, was a video series that I did where I explored a bunch of different Pokemon in the mainline games and how you maybe would want to use them in a competitive setting. So if you're looking to learn more about VGC and not necessarily building strong teams, but building competitively diverse teams and competitively diverse strategies, give that a shot. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.